The Middle East doesn't whisper, it echoes, and nowhere is that echo louder than in the land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, where history doesn't sit quietly in books, it walks the streets, it bleeds into the soil, and it refuses to stay in the past. This is not just a war of borders or flags, this is a collision of memory, power, fear, and unfinished business that has outlived empires and outpaced every peace plan thrown at it. Welcome to the scars of a global stormfronts. Let's get into it. When history loaded the gun, to understand Israel and Palestine, you have to rewind before the first shots were fired. Long before rockets and checkpoints, this land sat at the crossroads of empires. Ottoman rule collapsed after World War I, and Britain stepped in. Armed with promises it could never keep. One promise hinted at Arab independence, another pointed toward a Jewish homeland. Both were made over the same land. That contradiction was the original crack in the foundation. Then came World War II, and everything accelerated. The Holocaust didn't just scar Europe, it reshaped global politics. 6 million Jews murdered, survivors with nowhere to go. The world's guilt was real, heavy, and politically explosive. Supporting a Jewish state was framed not just as strategy, but as moral repair. In 1947, the United Nations proposed a partition, 2 states, one Jewish, one Arab, Jerusalem under international control. One side accepted, the other rejected it, seeing it as theft legalized by foreign powers. When Israel declared independence in 1948, war erupted immediately. By the time the fighting stopped, Israel controlled more land than the original plan allowed. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were displaced. Refugee camps became permanent scars, what Israelis called independence, Palestinians called catastrophe, and that difference in memory still fuels everything. Wars followed wars. In 1967, Israel fought neighboring Arab states and won in 6 days, seizing Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem and more. That victory changed the conflict's gravity. Israel wasn't just defending itself anymore, it was occupying territory filled with another people who did not accept its rule. Occupation hardened everything: military checkpoints, settlements, uprisings, retaliations. Each generation inherited the anger of the last, with new wounds layered on top. Peace attempts came and went, but none solved the core problem. 2 peoples claiming the same land, both armed with history, both convinced survival was on the line. Let's be clear, this is not a symmetrical war. Israel is a state with a powerful military, advanced technology, and strong international backing. Palestinians are divided between territories, leaderships, and strategies, with limited sovereignty and constant pressure. That imbalance shapes the battlefield and the narrative. But power does not equal peace. Superior force can control territory, but it cannot erase identity. Every airstrike, every blockade, every civilian death hardens beliefs on both sides. Fear feeds fear, retaliation becomes routine, and outrage becomes currency. Gaza in particular has become a pressure cooker. Dense population, limited movement, repeated cycles of violence. Each escalation promises to be decisive. None ever are. The world has tried diplomacy. Agreements were signed, handshakes photographed, deadlines announced, but peace talks collapse because they demand trust where trauma dominates. Borders remain disputed, Jerusalem remains sacred and contested, refugees remain displaced, security remains non-negotiable for Israel, while statehood remains non-negotiable for Palestinians. And leadership on both sides has often chosen survival over compromise. Hardliners thrive in chaos, moderates get buried under disappointment. External powers intervene, not always to solve, but often to stabilize things just enough to avoid explosion. The result is a conflict frozen in motion, always active, never resolved. Strip away the politics and what remains are ordinary lives shaped by extraordinary pressure. Children growing up to the sound of sirens, families planning weddings around ceasefires, young soldiers learning to see threat before humanity. Trauma doesn't stay local. It travels through families, across borders, and into the future. This war has taught the world a brutal lesson. History ignored doesn't fade, it, compounds. Every unresolved grievance becomes ammunition later, and when identity is tied to survival, compromise really feels like surrender. Israel and Palestine is not just a regional issue, it influences global diplomacy, fuels extremist narratives, and, tests international law in real time. It exposes the limits of military power and the cost of moral shortcuts. It reminds us that World War II did not end all wars. It simply rearranged the battlefield. This conflict endures because it sits at the intersection of justice and fear, and until both are addressed, not managed, not postponed, but faced head-on, the war will keep finding new ways to continue. The tragedy isn't just that peace hasn't been achieved, it's that generations have been born into a war they never chose, yet are expected to carry. The land remembers, the people remember, and until memory stops being weaponized, the scars remain open. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it does rhyme, and in Israel and Palestine the rhyme is relentless. If this deep dive added clarity, perspective, or made you see the conflict differently, don't let it stop here. Subscribe to the Scars of a Global Stormfronts. Share this with someone who wants more than headlines. History only matters if we learn from it, and we're just getting started.